I was really proud of this thing already. It was a silver medalist in Page, which had 9,000 something entries. And I honestly think this rewrite made it 20% better. What's up, everyone? I'm Nathan Graham Davis, and I'm a professional screenwriter. I rebroke into Hollywood in 2021, got my first movie made in 2022, and I'm leaving behind my day job in 2023. I'm using this series as a way to document the highlights and the challenges and the insights along the way as I try and take that momentum and turn it into a career. Okay, so rewrites part 2. In my last video, I talked about rewrites on the movie that got made earlier this year. Today, I want to talk about the work that I did on the first script I ever had under a shopping agreement, which was The Continuum. But before I do that, there's a button that looks like this and a button that looks like that, and it would mean a lot to my mom if you'd click them. Hi, Mom. Okay, so a shopping agreement, for those who don't know, is a contract that attaches producers to your script for a certain amount of time so that they can shop it around. It's basically an agreement that you're going to work together and try and get the movie made. Sometimes it can stipulate a few other things, but in general, it won't talk about money, and it gives both sides a few protections, and importantly, it gives the producers no legal rights to the script aside from that attachment. An option, on the other hand, gives someone the legal right to buy your script at any time they like for an agreed-upon price, provided that they do it within the option period. And usually, as they should, they give you some money for that privilege. This is generally seen as a positive thing because it means that the producers of the production company have some skin in the game, and this was the case with the movie of mine that got made earlier this year. So last fall, when I was offered my first shopping agreement, I was excited to work with the producers, but I wasn't actually excited by the type of contract. At this point, I've been involved in a number of projects over the years and had never seen anything materialize, so I was just kind of inherently skeptical. I'd also done a lot of free work on a number of projects over those years and ultimately felt that all of those were a waste of time. I wanted to see some money, I wanted to see some skin in the game, and I didn't really see the benefits of doing it any other way. Spoiler alert, I've since come around on shopping agreements, and I will get to that by the end of this video. But why did I take it in the first place? Well, a couple videos ago, I talked about how The Continuum was a very small script. I'd written it so it could be shot for like $1 to $2 million, thinking that people would want to snatch up something that was that high concept and that contained. And worst case, I figured I could maybe produce it myself. But as it turned out, it was almost too small. When I signed with my manager, he didn't see it as the type of thing that we could take out to studios, or at least not as a real smart move to break a career. Because the type of places that would potentially hire me for assignments and things were not looking to make movies that small. And so my manager really wanted to make a bigger splash than that the first time we went out with something. And it turned out he was right, because even with the producers, the first time that one of them emailed my manager about it, he said it's a smaller movie than what they normally take on. But they felt it had a ton of potential with the casting of the two leads and, attracting a cool emerging director. And if I was open to scaling it up a bit and working with people who had higher aspirations for it, they'd like to attach. Now, first of all, that was a pretty good sales pitch. Second, although my manager knew I preferred an option and he didn't really push me either way, he did advise me that this is exactly how a lot of smaller movies often get picked up, and he pointed out that these were both producers who'd gotten a number of good movies made. And the truth was, I'd seen things that both of them had done and enjoyed them very much, so I put faith in their ability to do it again and signed the agreement. We agreed that since their notes were minor and a director was going to influence the shape of things anyway, we'd hold off on any rewrites until we actually attached one. That was much appreciated because I'd mentioned I'd done a lot of free work in the past and that had never amounted to anything. And I didn't want to waste time when I could be working on a new spec. Although there is a key thing here. Pretty much all the work that I had done in the past had been on other people's ideas or IP. When things went south on those projects, I was left with nothing. With this one, the shopping agreement not only allowed me to retain ownership over the original, but the way my attorney worded it, it underscored that I retained the rights over any changes. So basically, if things didn't work out for some reason, it really wouldn't be wasted time because I could still take that version of that script and sell it to somebody else if I felt that that version was stronger. So anyway, the producers did their job, which it turns out they were quite good at, and they got interest from a number of directors. They interviewed them, landed on a duo that they felt were a perfect fit, and asked me to meet with them to see if I agreed. And this, by the way, was the first time I realized a major benefit of a shopping agreement. I still owned the rights, which means I had actual veto power over directors and other attachments. With an option, that's really not the case. and the writer has very little say because the production company has the right to purchase the script whenever they want. Obviously, if you use veto power the wrong way, you're likely to burn some bridges, but it's a cool thing to have, and it gives you a little more say in terms of how you shape the movie. So I met with that directing duo and found that they really were a perfect fit. I'd been super impressed by a movie that they directed. We clicked creatively right away, and they just had a vision for the movie that I loved. Plus, they just seemed fun to work with, so I was stoked. After we met, they officially attached, and I received their first set of notes. It was essentially a 3-page letter focused on how they envisioned bringing it to life. It was super collaborative, it was positive, it spoke a lot to how they saw themselves shooting it, included some great comps, and honestly, if this thing gets made, I'm going to have to ask if I can share some of it, I think, because it's like exactly the type of thing you want to send to a writer you're working with if you want to get their best. So right away, I felt like I was part of a team, and I got where they were coming from, and I was excited to get to work. Now, I can't get into the specifics of anything, obviously, but they said that they saw this exactly as written, a close-quarters, high-concept action thriller. But they thought that elevating it aesthetically with an environmental change could bulk up the production value and make it feel like its own thing. So as we went back and forth, we were talking about movies like Ex Machina, where it's a super contained movie, but it looks different than anything we've seen purely because of the setting. So while I've always cared about making things feel cinematic and putting together cool set pieces, this was a different way of thinking and a great learning experience, and they were so on point. Also important, they thought there was probably a way to do this where it wasn't just cool for the sake of cool, but would feel organic to the concept and the elements that were already in the script. So I completely got where they were coming from, but I'd written the script years ago, and it felt like a huge thing to totally reimagine the setting. So I did something that I forgot to mention in my last video, but has been super helpful in motivating me to do the hard work ever since I decided to get back into this game in 2020. What I've been doing is simply visualizing myself walking into my local movie theater with my family, getting some popcorn, then walking down the hall, seeing a poster for my movie, and an overhead marquee with the title on it. And then I imagine walking into the theater full of my family and friends, sitting down, leaning back in my chair, getting comfortable, and just feeling super happy in that environment. And then the lights come down and the titles come up and the words written by Nathan Graham Davis appear on screen. And maybe that sounds simple, maybe it sounds like really silly, but getting movies made has been the goal for all of these years, and this practice has been a game changer in terms of just helping me stay focused on that goal. It keeps me doing whatever I need to do to make it happen. And so I did that for a few days, and I went back to my concept and to my characters, and I dug deep, and eventually I came up with something that I loved. I pitched it to everybody, they loved it too, and the producers felt that we could make it work budget-wise, so I went back and I wrote it. And honestly, it feels like such a perfect fit that I cannot imagine the script without it. I was really proud of this thing already. It was a silver medalist in Page, which had 9,000 something entries, and I honestly think this rewrite made it 20% better. And it was basically just one of 2 notes that they had. The other note was pretty simple. The ending was a little bit ambiguous, and they thought that we had an opportunity to make our protagonist's arc hit harder emotionally if I could just have her make an active choice at the end. So I found a way to do that, and honestly, it was easy, and again, it was a great note. So I turned in that draft, and everybody was super enthusiastic. An interesting thing that I've come to realize isn't uncommon, though, is that the execution of those ideas generated more of them. Beefing up the protagonist's arc underscored some other opportunities to add depth to the 2 leads, and the producers felt that we could make the movie feel truly special by doing so. And that's a good note. I mean, everything comes down to characters and how the audience relates to them. So we chatted about those ideas, and it really just came down to finding organic ways to flesh out their backstories a bit so that we felt the effect of their arcs even more. I did 2 more drafts along these lines, both of them went pretty quickly, and then everyone agreed we were in a good place, and now that script is moving on to the next stage. I'm probably not going to be able to say anything more about it for a long time, but so far the experience on this one has been pretty much ideal, I guess. It's felt like a true collaboration. Everyone I've worked with has been contributing really excellent ideas, and the script it's better for it. It really is. And I'll say one more thing about that, by the way. By the time I was doing the 3rd draft, I really wasn't so sure it was necessary and didn't particularly want to do the work. I knew there'd be more rewrites as we got closer to production, and I felt it was really strong as it was already, so I thought maybe we could address those changes later. And maybe a little bit of that was true, but here's the thing. I did do that 3rd draft, and I even did a few tweaks on it afterward, and knowing what we're doing with it now and who's reading it, I am so glad I put that time in, because it now feels bulletproof, and I am completely confident that we're putting our best foot forward. And that's a good thing. And as for why I've come around on the idea of a shopping agreement, in addition to what I've talked about already, well, we've got some great producers attached who can get things done and who've done it many times. We've got exceptional, well-respected directors. And if we manage to attach the right talent, we're going to have one hell of a package. That's a wonderful thing in terms of getting it produced, which is priority number one. But as for the financial side, which is still a priority, if we sell this thing, it'll be a much better deal because of that package. It gives the writer much more negotiating power. So, we'll see what happens. I know enough to know not to get my hopes up about these things, but bare minimum, I've learned a ton from this experience. I'm grateful to have gotten to work with this team, and I'm really proud of what the script has become. And that's a pretty good place to be. With free work and shopping agreements, I think you really need to evaluate those things on a case-by-case basis, and no one should be able to make that decision for you. But sometimes it can definitely be worth it. Next week, I'm going to talk about one very cool thing I learned while rewriting Aether, which we're also doing under a shopping agreement. And right after I finish filming this, I will be interviewing David L. Williams, another newly pro writer who just landed on the annual blacklist with his phenomenal script, Clementine. I read this a year ago and absolutely loved it right before he broke in, and he has had a wild year since then. So that'll be dropping right at the beginning of January, and if you don't want to miss it, you know what to do. Like and subscribe. Thanks, everyone. Go make some art.